Welcome to SoulFood Coffeehouse in Redmond, Washington for the Astrology of February 2016. We have an interesting month ahead of us, and I just want to say for the people who are on internet watching and are not here, I know I just said this, but the Memorial Day weekend every year is NORWAC, the Northwest Astrology Conference. There'll be astrologers lecturing here all weekend, and you can find more information online at norwac.net. And there are astrologers that will be here from the United States, from France, from England, from Canada, from Australia. It's a fun weekend and a good weekend to immerse in astrology. I see some of you, how many here have been to a NORWAC or two? Yeah. Am I overstating it? It's a cool deal, isn't it?
It's a cool deal.
Yeah. So come and join us. Now, for the astrology of February 2016. I was online the other day and listening, can you believe that? I was online. And I was listening to a discussion of a couple of astrologer friends of mine, Austin Coppock and Kelly Surtees, and they were on Chris Brennan's weekly podcast, and I heard the line that I wish I came up with. And although I love quoting other people, I'm a quoteaholic, as many of you know, and I refuse to take the cure. Untrue to my Gemini rising, I like actually sourcing people and giving sources where this comes from. So the line is, this year, February is the new January. Now it comes from Kelly Surtees, who's an Australian astrologer now living in Canada. And it means this. Mercury turned retrograde on January 5th, which means that on New Year's Eve, Mercury was already thinking about dancing backwards. So the year opened with this kind of halting energy to Mercury beginning to turn retrograde. Mercury was retrograde until January 25th. And when Mercury turns direct, it takes a few days for it to get its legs back, to get any motion going forward. So for everyone who made New Year's resolutions on January 31st or on January 1st, and then find that you haven't gotten any closer to what you were planning on, relax. It's okay. You get to do it all over again. And in fact, I'm saying that the Aquarius New Moon, the new moon coming up on February 8th, in a couple of days, that will really be the launch of the year. Now that is the Chinese New Year, as you know also, is the new moon in Aquarius. So here's the deal. February is the new January. The year is starting now. Mercury has been retrograde. Mercury is now moving direct. And I want to ask a question. For those of you who track Mercury retrogrades in your life, how many of you had a particularly tough one this time around? I mean, yeah, a lot of you. A lot of me. All right, all of me. The thing that made this Mercury retrograde different than other Mercury retrogrades is Pluto. So if we look at the chart for today, we can see that Pluto, Venus, and Mercury are clustered in Capricorn. And Mercury moving direct now is moving away. I'm going to back this up a day at a time. I'm actually going to back this up all the way to the day before Christmas. This is like instant replay. There we go. So, coming into Christmas week, the week before Christmas, we had Mercury moving direct in Capricorn, heading toward Pluto. Now remember, Uranus and Pluto have been in this very slow-moving, dynamic square since about 2010, exact 2012 to 2015. It's no longer exact. It's beginning to separate, but the two of them are still within a degree or two. Here in December, they were almost 2 degrees apart, but that's still close enough to count, to work. So the week before Christmas, we had Mercury, and look up here at Mercury at 11 degrees on the 17th, and day by day that Mercury moves toward Pluto until on the 19th, just the week before Christmas, Mercury lined up with Pluto. Now, Mercury is the communicator planet. Mercury is how we send and receive information. My tea. Is it okay to drink tea at a coffee house?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Mercury is the communicator planet. Mercury is how we send and receive information. It's what we say and what we hear. It's what we write. It's the interaction between people. In fact, the word mercantile, where there's an exchange of goods and money, comes from Mercury. So Mercury, the communicator planet, was exactly lined up with Pluto, who I like to call Darth Pluto. We're talking the Lord of Darkness, the Lord of the underworld. Pluto is the unconscious. It's everything that's in the quote-unquote hell realms, which is everything that's not here on the surface. It's everything that's repressed or suppressed or tucked away. Mercury, when it lines up with Pluto, is about how we use the intellect and how we talk to bring things out of the unconscious into the open, and things always have more power over us when they're suppressed or repressed than when they're out in the open. So this Mercury-Pluto alignment is very powerful and very important for getting stuff, deep, dark, hidden stuff, out into the open. Normally, Mercury lines up with Pluto once a year for a day. But this year, Mercury lined up with Pluto the week before Christmas, and then as we moved onward, and we're only looking here at Mercury and Pluto, Mercury moves onward, it sneaks into Aquarius on January 1st, 2nd, and then on the 5th it turns retrograde and goes back into Capricorn. Now we'll say more about that in a moment. And now we're continuing on, and Mercury backs up, and on January 22nd, Mercury lines up with Pluto again. Can you see on January 22nd, Mercury backs up, it's retrograde, it lines up with Pluto, and then on the 25th it turns direct, and then it lines up with Pluto a third and final time on January 30th. Here's the deal. While the time that Mercury was backing up over Pluto and then going direct again, it barely moved. Mercury was lined up with Pluto, joined up with Pluto, pretty much that entire last week or so of January. And even now, on February 3rd, Mercury is still only a couple of degrees away from Pluto. So the reason why I'm spending time here is that this is really important to understand why this particular Mercury retrograde was tougher than others, because it forced us to go into some dark places. It forced us to go into the underworld, to go and bring back treasures, things perhaps that we get to use up here, and the dance isn't quite done yet, which is why we're dwelling on it. Even though Mercury is pulling away from Pluto, and we may feel yesterday and today and tomorrow a little bit lighter as we begin to feel that Mercury moving forward and making some progress. The problem is that right behind it, here comes Venus. So, as we follow this over the next few days, we can see that Venus lines up with Pluto on Friday, February 5th. there's Venus coming in. Now, Mercury is already at 20 degrees. It's 4 degrees away. Mercury's moving faster now, day by day. So Mercury is going to get closer and closer and closer to the sun. Meanwhile, Venus is just coming up to Pluto, and it will also square Uranus, just like Mercury did. We focused on the Mercury on Pluto, but it also squared Uranus, which is the unexpected stuff that happened, the things that brought things out into the open that you weren't necessarily expecting. So, the key to understanding the beginning of this month might be going back and looking at what you were processing and what you were working through back that week before Christmas, when Mercury touches Pluto for the first time, goes into the underworld, and now Mercury is separating. There's a little bit of openness around some of that communication stuff, and yet, even though Mercury is going direct, it's not yet moving into new territory. Remember, I said Mercury, the end of December, the first couple of days of January, Mercury moved from Capricorn into Aquarius. Just touched it, it was a tease. I think I talked about that last month, that some of the opening of this year was like a, wow, the future is here. Whoop, I'm going back into Capricorn. It's not really here yet. February is the new January. So what happens over these next days, and basically it's February 13th, I'm going to go back and forth here a little bit. On February 13th, Mercury moves from 29 degrees of Capricorn into Aquarius. So on February 13th, and Mercury's move into Aquarius on Valentine's Day Eve is really about the only positive aspect on Valentine's Day this year. Oh, we'll get there. It's not so bad. It's not so bad. But the thing is that Mercury turned direct on January 25th. And everyone gets really excited. Mercury's direct again. It's not in a retrograde. That's great. Mercury is going forward. But it's going forward over territory it's already traveled over twice. Once direct, once retrograde, and now it's going direct and going direct the third and final time over the same territory. It's Yogi Berra. This is deja vu all over again. So, even though we're moving forward, we're not yet moving into new territory. There's an astrology, a technical word for this phenomenon, and I'm going to bring it up now because later and over the next few months it's going to come back when we talk about the heavier retrograde that we get set up for later this month, but it doesn't actually retrograde until April, there we go, until April 17th. And that's the Mars retrograde. We'll get there in a few minutes. But when a planet goes forward and then backward, it's gone retrograde, and as it goes forward again, it's going through a territory it's been over once, twice, and now it's the third and final time. That area of the sky that is covered 3 times by a retrograde planet is called the planet's shadow. So, the technical way of saying this is that Mercury doesn't get out of its shadow until Valentine's Day, actually until the day before Valentine's Day. And what that means is that even though Mercury's been going direct for 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks, from January 25th, it's going direct through territory it's already traveled through. So we may not feel like we're really getting progress made on things that we have been trying to get going until mid-February. Got it? All right, enough on that. All right, let's come back to here and now. Although I never know where here and now actually is. You know, this is a real problem. There's a branch of astrology called horary astrology. People know what horary astrology is? It's a divinatory form of astrology where, like drawing tarot cards or casting the arrow sticks with the I Ching, you go to an astrologer and you ask a question, or you call your astrologer and say, I have to know where my watch is, I've lost it. This is a question, and instead of doing the chart for the person, the horary astrologer does a chart for the moment the question is asked. And in that chart, allegedly, is the answer. Now, what if you're on an airplane between New York and London, and the person next to you asks a question and you have a computer? What time zone are you in? You know, what time is it? Where are you? You know, especially if you're traveling at 500 miles an hour, which makes a difference. So, back to here and now, he says, without knowing where here is or when now is. February is the new January. Kelly's gonna either love me or hate me for like quoting her so many times. It's a great line, because this is the month where we really need to push forward and get things going that we might have liked to have happened back in January. Well, we start the month with the sun in Aquarius. This is the weird time of year where it's actually the deepest of winter. You know, Groundhog Day, which is Bridget's Day, which is Imbolc. It's one of the pagan cross quarter days, and it's actually the most intense, deepest of winter. It's the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. It's also the day or the time at which the days are growing longer, faster. The energy's really picking up, and it often feels like spring is close enough to touch, but it's still so far away. And that's the weirdness of Aquarius. Remember, we talked about last month how Aquarius was the weirdo sign. And this is just another piece of the weirdness of Aquarius. It's like we celebrate the growing of the light with you know, at this time of year, and the groundhog makes its decision. Is it going to be 6 more weeks, or you know, of winter, or not? What happens in 6 weeks? It's the spring equinox. Although it's the time at which we begin to think of spring, it's also the deadest and coldest of winter. I remember when I lived in Minneapolis, sometimes in a late January, early February day, the sun would come out and the temperature would rise 35 degrees by noon to 8 above zero. And it would feel warm. And yet it was still freezing, technically freezing. And yet it's that weirdness of the bright sun and the intense and the light and the feeling like winter is over, and yet it ain't. We don't have that so much here, but you know, this time of year in the Northwest, in the Great Northwest, in the Great Northwest, once we get past the beginning of February, even though spring is still far away, there are signs of spring. It feels like spring. The daffodils, the rhodies, the energy is there, and it's on the edge. Now, of course, in this part of the country, spring lasts until next winter, but that's another story. All right, so we have the Aquarian energy. We have, let's come back to the chart. We have Mercury having formed its, let's come back to here. Mercury having conjuncted Pluto and squared Uranus, followed by Venus doing the same thing, and that Venus conjunct Pluto is on February 5th, and Venus's square to Uranus is on February 6th. So we're getting this Uranus-Pluto square all over again. That energy is in the mix these days. The interesting thing is that once Mercury gets past the Venus and Pluto, and then once Venus does, each of those planets will make a harmonious trine with Jupiter. And here's the good news behind this. We have Mercury forming that the trine to Jupiter on February 6th. Right here, there's Mercury. Where's Mercury? In that cluster right there. The moon having come through Capricorn on the 5th and 6th. But Mercury forming a trine with Jupiter. This is optimistic. This is bountiful. Mercury, the communicator, is communicating with Jupiter, saying everything is possible. This is good news, unless we reach too far, of course. Right behind that, Venus makes the conjunction with Pluto on the 5th, the square to Uranus on the 6th, and right behind that, then Venus makes the trine with Jupiter. Venus makes the trine with Jupiter on the 9th, actually the 9th and the 10th, you can see right there. So again, this is optimistic, but it's Venus now, it's nice, it feels good. You know, this is the day you should be, even though it's a Tuesday, this is the day you should be celebrating Valentine's Day, because Venus and Jupiter is sweet, it's indulgent, it's yummy. And unfortunately, as Venus moves on, that energy closes down pretty quickly. The other thing that's happening this week is that on February 7th, let's go back to the 7th, the Sun, moving through mid-Aquarius, forms a 90-degree angle with Mars. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Mars. We'll talk a lot more about Mars next month, because Mars becomes the main game as it slows down and turns retrograde. You know, the planets actually move like they're supposed to. What do I mean by that? Well, from Earth's point of view, Mercury is going around the Sun. We're way out, you're out there on Earth, and Mercury is going around the Sun. What it looks like is it looks like it's going back and forth. That's why we get 3 retrogrades a year. Mercury goes around the Sun, and from Earth's point of view, it does this back and forth like a pendulum, like the communication, talking, listening, talking, listening. Are you with me? How the planet actually moves in the way that we think of it. Venus moves in a way that it forms a 5-pointed star with the Earth from Sun's point of view. And the 5-pointed star is the symbol of beauty. This is the golden mean, the divine proportion. Venus moves to Earth as the golden mean. In that ratio, it's that sense of aesthetic perfection, love, beauty. Mars is the weird planet as far as it moves. Mars actually goes through about 10 signs of the zodiac in a year. And then it retrogrades and it hangs out in one sign for almost 8 months. It was the motion of Mars that made ancients crazy, and it was the puzzle that Johannes Kepler, who figured out the laws of planetary motion, it was like when he solved the orbit of Mars, the mathematics to that, he said, and he saw that the ancient Ptolemaic calculations were off by 8 minutes of arc. Kepler said, he wrote, I have robbed these secrets from the ancient ancient crypts of Egypt. I have touched mountains, and it is tremendous what they belch forth. I mean, this is a guy that was totally humbled by what he discovered. What he discovered was the key to figuring out the craziness to Mars. Now, what's interesting is that Mars moves like you would expect it to, like an arrow. So you got an arrow in a bow, and you pull it back, you pull it back, you pull it back, you pull it back, you hold, you aim, you release. When you release, it doesn't go fast, it starts off slowly, and it's not going at maximum speed until it passes the bow. And then it goes really fast. This is the Mars motion. The retrograde slows down, stops, goes retrograde. 8 months in the same sign, and then it releases 7.5 months roughly. And then it releases, and then as it goes forward slowly, slowly, and then it gains speed, and then it goes through 10 signs. The planets move like we interpret them. Why are we talking about Mars? Well, Mars moved into Scorpio about a week ago, and Mars is now moving through Scorpio. But Mars gets into Sagittarius. It moves into Sagittarius in the 1st of March. So it spends all of February in Scorpio, and then it moves into Sagittarius on March 5th. But then in Sagittarius, on April 17th, just at 8 degrees of Sagittarius, Mars turns retrograde. And it stays, and it goes back into Scorpio the end of May. It's in Scorpio all of May, the last part of May and all of June, and then it goes back into Sagittarius not until August. So, and when I was saying 8 months before in one sign, I meant 8 weeks. I'm so sorry. I can blame everything on Mercury retrograde, even though it's not. I have time in a bottle. Yeah.
Don't forget to mention that Saturn is retrograde too.
I'm not supposed to forget that Saturn is retrograde too. Yeah, the outer planet, with Mars, along with Mars. Yeah, and the outer planet retrogrades, the further out you go, the more subtle the retrogrades go, but they're like homeopathic remedies. Subtle doesn't mean unimportant. But focusing on this Mars thing just a moment, Mars is in Scorpio now. And in Scorpio, Mars is powerful. In ancient astrology, Mars was the ruling planet. I don't use the word ruling planet often. I like to say the planet associated with, or the key planet. That's my modern humanistic pussy way of talking about the planets. There are traditionalists who would say that I don't speak the truth because the planets do rule the signs. I'm not there. Anyhow, Mars, the ancients said that Mars ruled Aries and Scorpio. Pluto was given to Scorpio, and modern astrologers say that Pluto is the planet that rules or is associated with Scorpio. However, it doesn't take away Mars's affinity and connection, and from a traditional point of view, Mars is still the ruler of Scorpio. When we take Mars away from Scorpio, we also take away some of Mars's wetness, because Scorpio is a water sign. And Mars used to be associated with the fiery, feisty warrior side of Aries, and also the emotional, intense, passionate side of Scorpio. So with Mars in Scorpio, regardless of whether you use modern rulers or not, Mars in Scorpio, Mars is at home. Mars is powerful in Scorpio. There's an intensity to it. And we had at the opening of this month, actually today, early this morning, Mars formed a sextile with Pluto. Mars at 16 degrees of Scorpio formed a sextile with Pluto at 16 Capricorn, this energizing, intensifying both the Mercury conjunction that's already happened, the Venus conjunction that's yet to happen. It gives that power, stamina. There's that sense of having the energy. It's like having cash reserves, but they're energy reserves. And so we're getting that this month from that Mars. But Mars moves forward. Let's just keep our eye on Mars for a moment. And I want to just point out that on February 18th, Mars hits 23 degrees of Scorpio. Why is this important? Because when Mars turns direct on June 29th, it'll do it at 23 degrees of Scorpio. What that means is that by the end of this month, Mars, although it's pushing into new territory, is pushing into territory that we're not going to deal with in its finality until summer. This is the way the shadow works. Mars enters into its shadow in February, even though it doesn't turn retrograde until April, and it doesn't go direct until the end of June. So this Mars in Scorpio becomes an important piece of this month, and it gives us a power that's beneath the surface. There's an intensity, there's an emotional dance that's playing for keeps that isn't necessarily up on the surface. Okay, new moon. New moon is on February 8th. We have a new moon that is the Aquarius New Moon at 19 degrees of Aquarius at 6:38 a.m., that would be Pacific time, on February 8th. Now, the Aquarius New Moon is the Chinese New Year, and so that's an important new moon unto itself. The fact is that the Aquarius New Moon sets the tone for the intellectual development for the year ahead. Remember, Aquarius is an air sign. Aquarius is the futuristic sign. And this new moon actually is the seed for how we conceive our own futures. This new moon is getting an extra buzz from two directions. One, remember the sun just squared Mars. I said that about just a few minutes ago. The sun squared Mars just the day before on February 7th. So Mars is at 18, the sun is now a degree beyond that at 19. So this new moon, the moon is coming through the square to Mars during that new moon. Secondly, with Uranus at 17 degrees of Aries, we have the new moon also forming a sextile with Uranus. What does this mean? The square to Mars is feisty, it's fiery, it's argumentative, it's powerful, it's in Scorpio, so there's an intensity of emotion here. It's not just about playing sports on a field, it's about something where you have a piece of yourself in the game. There's something that involves, your commitment here, and yet this the new moon square to Mars suggests that we can get worked up over the wrong things. You see, Mars is the warrior, and the sun and moon create that seed period of, in Aquarius, it's I know the truth. Now, Aquarians know everything. You ever see that bumper sticker that says, hire teenagers while they still know everything? Well, hire Aquarians because they do know everything. And it's good news, bad news. I mean, Aquarius has that ability to bridge the large conceptual pieces and put things together in big ways. So they do know a lot. But the downside is that they can be so certain of what they know that they become fixed or rigid and they don't have room for growth. It's a danger. And as that new moon squares Mars, we might find ourselves in arguments over things that are either not the truth or things that are not important, because the energy is right at the edge and Mars wants to engage. The good news is that the new moon is also sextiling Uranus, and this does create some fluidity to the situation, because remember, Uranus is the planet that releases built-up energy. Nevertheless, there's still a sense here of the ability to lose our temper, or the ability to slide into some sort of conflict and make it into something bigger, even though that resolves, the Uranus is like lightning striking. And so it's good news, bad news. It's a great time to bring things out into the open, but it's also it's a great time, but it's not great. It's also a time when we can bring something out into the open and turn it into a major conflict that it wouldn't normally be. And that conflict can actually take a life on of its own. So, this new moon, around any new moon, it is always a good time to spend time in silence. It's a great time to think about what you want to happen. The astrological wisdom is you plant a seed at a new moon and you harvest at the full moon. Now, we're not talking about mung beans, spinach, or sunflower seeds. We're talking about seeds of intention. And by actually taking some time and clarifying what you want your future to be around the new moon, doing that around the new moon, makes use of the growth over the next couple of weeks of the light of the moon. So we plant the seed of intention around the new moon, and although there are practitioners who will do their rituals at the moment of the new moon, which, as I said, was 6:38 a.m. Pacific time, which is 9:38 Eastern time in the United States, there are many astrologers who believe that in order to catch the maximum energy, you're better off doing your new moon ritual either hours or a day or two after the new moon, because the cycle grows. Now, what this really tells me is, and I would suggest, you do your meditation or your intentional ritual at the new moon, but you don't just do it and leave it. Like any seed, you have to tend it and care for it while it's in its critical stages. Which means that over the first 2 or 3 days, coming back to that intention, putting energy into it and working it, that's the way you allow these things to grow. The difficulty, of course, is the potential of getting so enthusiastic about what it is that you think you're doing and so concerned that you're doing something that you know is right, that you can ride roughshod over other people's feelings and thoughts in order to accomplish what you want to. I'm talking about that new moon squaring to Mars and sextiling Uranus. And I should say just another word about that, because if the new moon is sextiling Uranus and squaring Mars, we didn't talk about Mars' quincunx, that's 150 degrees, that's the angle of annoyance, of adjustment, and that exact quincunx, let's go back here to a day at a time. That exact quincunx, the Mars quincunx Uranus was on February 5th. And again, this is a bit disjointed, that's on Friday. And there's that sense of Mars in Scorpio has somewhere it wants to go. Mars is about direction. It's about energy. Mars has somewhere it wants to go. In Scorpio, it's not necessarily up front with it. In Aries, Mars is up front. You know, Mars in Aries, everyone knows where you're going. Mars in Scorpio, no one's sure. But you got a plan and you're developing it, and part of it is in keeping it secret, it develops more power and more energy. So that Mars in Scorpio has a plan. It quincunxes Uranus, and there's that whole question of what do I share, what don't I share, how hard do I push? You know, there's that kind of the making the adjustment between the intensity of the Mars in Scorpio and the immediacy of the Uranus in Aries. All right, so let's move on to Valentine's Day. We talked about how Mercury moves out of its shadow, and so on Valentine's Day we're getting inklings of communication that's moving things into new places. This can be wonderful, especially in an intimate relationship, of having communication in new places. It also can be scary. Do I really want to talk about this? You see, this Valentine's Day is not the easiest Valentine's Day from a standpoint of smoothly running energy. We do have Mars coming out of a sextile to Jupiter. This is exact the day before, which again leads me to suggest that if you got a hot Valentine's Day date, do it on Valentine's Day Eve, or Valentine's Day Eve. Because you're playing into the Mars sextiling Jupiter, which is optimistic and enthusiastic, and but by the time we get to the 14th, that energy is already beginning to wane, and it's beginning to kind of pull back in a little bit. And we have the Mercury in Aquarius, which is intellectual, not romantic. We have the Moon in Taurus, which is ideally comfortable. And I think this Valentine's Day can be comfortable and practical. Why do I say practical? I say practical because the moon in Taurus on Valentine's Day is going to make trines to Pluto in Capricorn and Jupiter and the North Node in Virgo. We have what we call a moving grand trine. This grand trine only lasts for a few hours as the moon is moving through this point. This can be wonderful and lovely. I mean, from a standpoint of love, it can be great. And it's practical, but it's more comfortable. It's more practical than it is exciting and or romantic. If there is romance involved, it's a safe and secure romance, not necessarily an on the edge. Although we're still getting a little bit left over from the Mars sextile to Jupiter, but that is waning a little bit. So I think that this Valentine's Day can be interesting, but I think more than anything, it's like make your plans in advance, be practical, play into that earth side stuff, and kind of take it for what it is rather than turning it into some sort of fantasy that will lead to disappointment. The days after Valentine's Day, we have a couple of important shifts. On February 16th, Venus follows Mercury into Aquarius. And this kind of completes the inner planet energy of Capricorn. We had a whole lot of stuff cooking in Capricorn. And now we've moved with Venus and Mercury ahead of the game. Mars isn't going to catch up for a long time because Mars is going to do its retrograde dance. So we have Venus moving into Aquarius on the 16th, and the Sun moving into Pisces on the 18th. So we have two things going on here. It's, first of all, Venus in Aquarius is interesting. Mercury in Aquarius is understandable because Mercury is intellectual, and Aquarius is an air sign. So Mercury in Aquarius works. It may be quirky and it may be unpredictable, but Mercury in Aquarius is very sociable, and it's there's a sense of Mercury in Aquarius works. Venus, on the other hand, is warm and connective. Aquarius is cool and disconnective. Doesn't mean Aquarius can't be friendly. Venus in Aquarius is less romantic than friendly. Venus in Aquarius knows how to play the social rules and all the games, and it'll do it in a matter of companionship. But there's a piece of Aquarius that doesn't like the wetness. And I always think of Jeff saying that, and I probably said this last month when I talked about the Sun in Aquarius, Aquarius loves humanity. It's the people they hate. It's like the idea of love and being in a relationship, great. They do it great. But don't go getting too squishy. Because Aquarius needs a little bit of distance. It needs a little bit of perspective around emotion rather than being overwhelmed by it. And so as Venus moves into Aquarius, Venus isn't thrilled about being there. She can be a lot of fun. She can be very quirky and very eccentric. But it's not a reliable, easy place for Venus to be. At the same time, we have the Sun moving into Pisces on the 18th, and this is setting up a whole different energy because the Piscean Sun is kind of warming us up. It's basically giving us a sense of sensitivity and compassion, and it's activating our dreams and our imagination. And we'll probably feel this right away as the Sun moves into Pisces, especially because a week and a couple of days after the Sun moves into Pisces, it moves into Pisces on the 18th, by the 28th, 10 days later, the Sun has caught up with Neptune in a 14-year stay in Pisces. What that means is Neptune is the planet, one of the planets associated with Pisces. Neptune represents our dreams and our imagination. It represents our fantasies. It represents illusions and spirituality, everything that's not physical. So, as the Sun moves toward its conjunction with Neptune, as it does As soon as it moves into Pisces, we will feel it. And for the next week or so, that sun will move closer and closer until it reaches Neptune, the conjunction to Neptune, on the 28th. And this is the ultimate dream, the ultimate kind of falling into the oceans that kind of dissolve our individual ego point of view. On the way to the sun's move to conjunction to Mercury, we have one other thing that we need to talk about this month, and that is the full moon, which is on February 22nd at 10:19 a.m. Eastern, 10:19 a.m. Pacific time. And there we go, that's close. Whoop, we went past, come on. We can get there. There we go, that's close enough. All right, so we're looking at about 10 o'clock Pacific time. The moon, this is a full moon in Virgo. It's opposite the sun in Pisces. The sun is conjuncting. It's still a few days away from being exact, but we would call this a full moon that is opposed Neptune. So the dance here is that the moon is reflecting our need to make things exact, to make things perfect, to analyze, to do that Virgoan thing, to get it right. And the moon in Virgo wants us to respond in ways that are effective and efficient. Two good Virgo words. However, the sun is shining with Neptune in Pisces, and it's saying not a chance. And so we're like in this tug of war at this full moon of on one side, we're striving towards getting the details right and getting the information right, and on the other hand, we have this dream. We have this amorphous kind of fantasy that as we try to describe it, it just disintegrates because we can't quite put our words around it. This full moon, again, is the fulfillment, though, of the intentions that we set up at the new moon on February 8th. We have an extra day this month, and for the record, I don't get paid for the extra day talking about it here, but it's a leap year, and we do have a February 29th.
So pass the hat.
Okay, I don't get paid for any of the other days either, but it's okay. And on February 29th, we do have, we need to go back to the day here. On February 29th, we have the moon. The moon moves into Sagittarius late in the day, and you can see there it catches up with Saturn on March 1st. But Venus, yeah, let's see, why isn't, yeah, okay, we need to come back. There we go. So on the 29th, Venus at 15 degrees of Aquarius is forming a sextile with Saturn at 15 degrees of Sagittarius. Normally, Venus and Saturn don't do great together because Venus is warm and Saturn is cold, because Venus says, I want to merge and I like the idea of kind of melting and kind of feeling good, and Saturn goes, whoa, we need boundary. And yet, on the 29th, Venus is forming a sextile with Saturn, which says that there's a really healthy relationship between the facts, what is the reality, Saturn, and the idea of what we're attracted to, that would be Venus. And so this Venus-Saturn dance is really working, which means that we can take what we want and what we like and what we're wanting to work for, and we don't need to get it right away. That's the beauty of a Saturn-Venus when it's working, is we can save for a rainy day, or we can work hard to get what we know we deserve. Whether or not we get the immediate gratification is not as important. So this is kind of a sweet little day, even though it might have a coolness about it. That coolness is not to be mistaken for loss or alienation or loneliness. It's just the ability to pull back enough to make something real. So, in summary, looking at this month ahead, we are finally moving forward. And yet it's interesting because the first part of the month we still have Mercury in its shadow. We're moving forward, but we're moving forward in familiar territory. By the end of the month we're still moving forward, but now we have Mars in its shadow, moving forward in territory that we're going to be back in toward the end of June. So there's a little bit of kind of time warps here going on. The fact of the matter, though, is that we are finally clear of the Mercury retrograde. I think that just to quote Kelly for the fourth and final time today, February is the new January. For all of you who had things you wanted to do and things you were thinking about doing and haven't done in January, don't feel discouraged. Don't worry about what isn't done yet. Now is your time to put things into motion and to move forward. Before we break, I want to do one other thing. I wanted to take just a moment or two and take a couple of, these are going to be really fast looks at a couple of the presidential candidate charts. And we don't normally do that, but I mean, I was looking at them this week, and again, maybe we'll come back to them as the election heats up. But I just wanted to spend a moment here on Donald, whatever his name is. I have no political bias. No political bias at all. Donald Trump. Donald the Trump. Okay, so Donald was born with the sun in Gemini. The sun in Gemini and the moon opposite it in Sagittarius. This is a full moon birth. You see that? Where are his nodes? The nodes, the south node is lined up with the moon, which means the north node is lined up with the sun. When the nodes of the moon are close to the sun and moon at the time of a new moon or a full moon, this is an eclipse. Donald Trump was born at an eclipse, during a lunar eclipse. And actually, because his moon is at 21 degrees and the sun is almost 23, he was actually born 4 hours before a total lunar eclipse. Eclipses are inherently unstable. Need we say more?
Say no more.
All right, well, let's say more, because he has the planet Uranus lined up with the sun. All right, you want to talk about unstable, you want to talk about crazy. And again, a crazy here is not meant as a judgment for sanity versus insanity. It's about people who are just other than normal. You know, you see strong Uranian influences in inventors and ingenious people who do things in ways that no one else does. And without the political judgment, Donald Trump is born with Uranus very close to the sun, 5 degrees away from the sun. And so that makes him a Uranian, which may be great, but it's someone who will be like lightning. What's the thing about lightning? It's unpredictable. Even when you know it's going to strike, you don't know when it's going to strike, how it's going to strike, or where it's going to strike. You know, and so Donald Trump has that thing going. And of course, being a full moon birth, you know, on the nodes at an eclipse, I think that that does say a lot. Now, one other thing that is interesting is he has Jupiter and Chiron together, and this Jupiter and Chiron are trine one side of the full moon and sextile the other. And this normally is a good deal thing. It releases the energy, it smooths it out, it takes the energy away. Jupiter is the planet of bigger, better, and more. It's the planet, when it's aberrated, of greed. Chiron is the wounded healer. They say that when Jupiter and Chiron are together, you get the personality who always is chasing the next rainbow. Dissatisfied, but always looking for the next potential thing that will solve everything. And one last thing I wanted to say about his chart is the fact, I was talking about the Venus-Saturn and how difficult that is. He has Venus and Saturn conjunct. And it's interesting because Venus and Saturn often means no love, no money. This is the traditional concept because Venus is nice things, it's sweet. Saturn says hold back. Well, why then does Donald Trump have a Venus-Saturn conjunction, and he's in interesting company because Bill Gates has a Venus-Saturn conjunction too. And it's not that these people don't have money or love. It's that there's a fear of not having it and can be a hoarding it. There can be a greed around it that says I'm in it for the long haul, and that Saturn creates boundaries and creates this is what I have, this is mine. Food for thought.
It's in Cancer.
His is in Cancer, yes. You just take a real quick look at Bernie Sanders' chart, and we'll come back to these. I don't want to spend too much time. I spent more time on Trump than I wanted to. Bernie Sanders is a Virgo. The Virgo is someone who's, it's service. Virgo is the sign of service. But it's someone who is analytical and is focused. The interesting thing about Bernie Sanders' chart is that he has a moon conjunct Mars in Aries. Mars in Aries is the direct, I was talking about Mars in Aries earlier. Mars in Scorpio, they're secretive. You don't know where they're going. But they got a plan, and the holding it in makes the plan stronger. Mars in Aries, I have a Mars in Aries. If I'm going somewhere, you know where I'm going. Bernie's going somewhere, you know where he's going. But that Mars is lined up with the moon, and it's opposite Venus. This is the strong piece of his chart, and he has, like Trump, he has Jupiter at a point that is trine and sextile. In Trump's case, it's the sun and the moon. In Sanders' case, it's the moon and Mars and Venus. But Jupiter, again, is the potential. It's the hope. It's the opportunity. And that Mars-Moon, it's interesting because Bernie Sanders is not necessarily, he's not necessarily aggressive, but that Mars-Moon makes someone emotionally assertive and angry. Because Mars is the warrior planet, it's red. And so he's got that, but it's connected with the moon, it's the feeling. And it's opposite Venus. Venus is the planet of money. I mean, if Sanders has one thing in his, whole orientation that he's been talking about for 30 years, is the redistribution of wealth. And he's pissed about it. Mars, moon, I'm pissed about it. Far away from the wealth. Jupiter, big idea. There's other things, but, and just in the spirit of, we'll just do a moment here. Clinton's chart there's an unknown, it's what we call dirty data. There's two different stories. There's an 8 a.m. and an 8 p.m. and there's someone else who knows someone who knows her, and she said that she had Leo rising. I don't think, but the 8 a.m. chart is the one that's on the most record, but it's not, if anyone says this is her chart, you can be the one that says, no, it's dirty data, no one really knows. No one knows. Regardless, which really means we don't know the degree of her moon, but we know her moon is in Pisces, because it was in Pisces all day. And we don't know what her ascendant is, which means we don't know her houses. But we do know that she's a Sun, Chiron, Venus, Mercury, South Node, all clustered in Scorpio. Do we know what she's about? Not a chance. The Jupiter, though, has just escaped into Sagittarius, and that's the part of her that can do this, that can talk about the big ideas, but behind it is all this hidden stuff that we will never know. It doesn't matter how many investigations there are, we'll never know. But it is an emotional chart because we have the moon in watery Pisces and all this stuff in Scorpio, and then this is really the powerhouse. This is the ambition. This is the drive of her chart. Is a conjunction of Mars and Pluto. We talked earlier about the Mars and Pluto. You know, Mars and Pluto are tough cookies. This is a nasty neighbor, a nasty planetary neighborhood when you have Mars and Pluto and Saturn together. Liz Green once said that Saturn's Pluto's only friend. And Mars isn't much better. I mean, you know, these are the planetary bad boys. If there was a planetary mafioso, these guys would be it. I mean, Saturn is control. Pluto is Darth Vader. You know, it's the dark side. And Mars is the warrior. And all of those planets in Leo are 90 degrees or square to her Scorpio planets. This is someone who is a fighter, who is a control freak. And I'm not saying that she wouldn't do good. I don't know. A discussion for some other time. All I'm saying, though, is that regardless of what time of day she was born, this is her chart, and yet she has this psychic sponge Pisces moon, and I don't know if anyone's seen the picture of her with some underprivileged children, and she didn't even know she was being filmed, I believe. And it's like she was just so there and so present. I'm not saying she doesn't care. She's got a hard-ass side to her, but she's also got a Pisces moon. All right, welcome to the presidential politics. We went longer than we normally did. Was that okay that we talked about that? Thank you to Soul Food, who hosts us here. Thank you.